It's an open mosque day later in the month. We'll learn about that, but we got a lot to cover tonight. Welcome in.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Pleasure to have you aboard. The federal government's operating. I don't know. I don't really get a sense that people were worrying about that over the weekend. I think if it shut down, you're but whatever. How you doing? Good. Do you respond to me when I ask you that question on the TV? Do it? Lexi does. Kevin just makes signs at me. Anyway, thanks for joining us on this Monday evening. Let's go to the rundown and see what's happening here. Government operating. Relief. Yeah, sort of. Here's the latest on what happened with it and the 100-day thing. That's constant conversation.
A $1 trillion spending bill that will fund the government through September 30th was released Monday morning. President Trump dropped some of his initial demands so lawmakers could reach a deal. The bill includes $1.5 billion for more border security, but the money can't be used for a border wall. The legislation does not cut funding for Planned Parenthood, and the Environmental Protection Agency will keep 99% of its funding. And military spending increases $14.8 billion. The White House had initially asked for $30 billion. The bill is scheduled for a vote in the House on Wednesday and has the bipartisan support needed to pass. Lawmakers could next move on to the revised health care bill. The current draft of the bill does not provide guaranteed coverage for pre-existing conditions, allowing states to opt out of that mandate. But the president told CBS's Face the Nation the final legislation will cover pre-existing conditions.
This has evolved over a period of 3 or 4 weeks. Now, we really have a good bill. I think they could have voted on Friday. I said, just relax. Don't worry about this phony 100-day thing.
This phony 100-day thing. This phony 100-day thing, he made it the big deal. I mean, it's been a tradition for for many presidencies, all the way back to Roosevelt. But he made it a big deal. It is unbelievable. And look, the no wall thing. There's not going to be a wall. There will not. I'm telling you, there won't be a wall. Did Gitmo close? No. This is Gitmo. There won't be a wall. Got it? Good. Now, as far as this healthcare situation is concerned and pre-existing conditions, there seems to be quite the difference between Donald Trump's understanding of what the high-risk pools and their impact on the pre-existing condition thing is and what is really understood in Congress to be floating here. I don't think he knows what he's talking about. I just don't think he knows what he's talking about. And no matter what passes the House of Representatives, it's dead meat if pre-existing conditions aren't tidied up perfectly in the Senate. They're not going to screw that up. So relax on that. All right, let's move on to the next item here. The 100-day the 100-day thing is such a dumb thing unless he feels like they need to put an ad together for it. Sometimes I just feel like if I put a pin in my pupil, it would be less painful. Like if you stick something in your eye, it would be less painful than trying to follow this guy's logic. Here's the 100-day ad.
Donald Trump, sworn in as president 100 days ago. America has rarely seen such success. A respected Supreme Court justice confirmed. Companies investing in American jobs again. America becoming more energy independent. Regulations that kill American jobs eliminated. The biggest tax cut plan in history. You wouldn't know it from watching the news. America is winning, and President Trump is making America great again.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Honest to God, I mean, look, I know this feels like a real two-step on the on the president's head tonight, but at what point do you core remaining reported pollable consistently core Trump supporters? At what point do you see, this is a circus. This is a circus. That ad and the fake news thing coming out. Now, we have been conditioned over a course of a long time that political ads don't need to be true, right? So you got a president who charges the press on more than randomification with the idea that they're producers of fake content. Yet we have, and that's finally calling, you know what, a you know what, right? But when it comes to ads like that, we've all been conditioned to just digest the pablum from anybody. The question is, after 100 days in the White House, why an ad like that, campaign fake style? Nobody calls him on it. It's just, nobody in the Republican Party calls him on it. Everyone just sits back and shakes their heads and says to themselves, I don't know what to do about this. Call it out for what it is. Fake content, not fake news. All right, correspondence dinner, you know, the people who produce the fake news. The Muslim comedian is, you know, making a point or two here, Hassan Minhaj. He, you know, I watched this. I caught it like late Saturday night. It shows you what kind of an exciting life I have. He was okay.
We gotta address the elephant that's not in the room. The leader of our country is not here.
And they would love to be with us right here tonight. The media deserves a very, very big, fat failing grade.
Yeah, whatever. So he's doing his Pennsylvania rally. Hassan Minhaj is doing his thing. And the correspondence dinner, it was fine. It was okay. You know, he had a moment. This was his serious moment to make a point.
Only in America can a first-generation Indian-American Muslim kid get on this stage and make fun of the president.
All right. We know that theme. America's been great for a long period of time because the First Amendment rules. Donald Trump didn't miss much by missing the dinner. Now, coming back home for a second, tomorrow is the special election on the east side for Kevin Jackson, the Providence City Councilor. This headline kind of describes what's going on. What's fascinating in Dan McGowan's story here, there are a handful of high-profile politicians who have an opportunity to vote in this recall election. Who are they? Gina Raimondo, your governor. David Cicilline, 1st District Congressperson. Who else? Our state treasurer, the young one, and Aaron Rugenberg, the state rep who replaced Gordon Fox, who's in jail. None of them would tell the press how they're going to vote in a recall election of Kevin Jackson, who's alleged to have pilfered 6 figures worth of money from the kids that he coached. Now, everyone's innocent until proven guilty, but there's a standard for public representation that ought to be a little bit higher. It is chicken for these 4 elected officials to take a pass hiding behind the idea that we all have a privacy right for voting. A recall election is a whole nother kit and caboodle. It really is. And the idea that you don't have a right to hear what they're going to do on a recall election, to stand by a current elected official or not, is embarrassing. Where's the courage? Where's the leadership? Where's the integrity in that? Governor Raimondo, David, Seth, Aaron. Where is it? Is it unbelievable? Just to me. All right. So, in an ongoing conversation about the Muslim community here in Rhode Island, we have done, I don't know, half a dozen shows on this at least. There's a new open house day planned for we here in Rhode Island, to visit mosques and to get a little bit of understanding. And I don't know where we are with this. This is like, I think, the 2nd year in a row that we've had this project going. Wendy Manchester Ibrahim is my guest from the Rhode Island Council for Muslim Advancement. Welcome. Nice to have you.
Nice to be here.
This is, I think, this is the 2nd year that you guys are doing this?
We did it last year at one of the mosques.
Okay. In North Smithfield?
We actually...
Was it North Smithfield Mosque?
We did North Smithfield, and actually we did the Masjid al-Karim, which is over by the high schools in Providence, right off Broad Street.
Okay.
So we had 2, but this is the first time that we're doing all the mosques open at the same time, so
Okay.
people get a chance to.
Give me the executive summary on this. Why are you doing this?
We are doing this to build some more understanding and help people to meet us as neighbors and be part of the community and get their questions answered.
Did the last experience provide a lot of questions?
It was actually a very positive experience on both sides of the fence, I think. I think it got a lot of Muslims involved in wanting to participate in meeting our neighbors, and a lot of times not everyone's as visibly Muslim as I am, and so it was nice for people to be able to come out and be part of a presentation and teach about their faith. And then it was also really helpful for people to be able to come in and meet us and talk to us and ask questions. And we like to dispel myths because the media is full of a lot of propaganda and myths right now.
More fake news.
A lot of fake news.
When we come back, we'll talk about what those are. Stay with us.
We've heard a lot, not only from the president-elect, but also from the folks that surround him, that really worry us and frankly really frighten us. And so that's why it's more important than ever that we come together at the local level.
Everyone is afraid. You know, it's unfortunate that I've lived in this country my entire life, and I've never felt afraid like I do now.
All right, that was a while back with Mayor Elorza. What was that gathering? Do you remember what that was for?
He put together a council, a Muslim advisory council, in order to be able to understand the concerns of Muslims in Providence.
Is it effective?
I'm not personally part of that, but I have found that the politicians in general have been really good at outreaching to our community to find out what our needs are. And help make sure we're supported and feel safe.
Yeah, you know, listen, not every immigrant issue is the same. Not every threat is the same. Not every worry from the White House and Donald Trump is the same. I have opined here a lot that I think Jorge Elorza has oversold a lot of this illegal immigration stuff. And what I think sometimes confuses folks is that we throw the entire discussion of immigration, travel ban, all into one lump, and it's not the same soup, man. It's right. These are very distinct and separate and unrelatable issues in many ways. You agree with that?
I do agree with that. I don't think that anyone in the Muslim community or otherwise would want anyone who is here committing criminal acts to be able to remain here. And the propaganda about all Muslims being terrorists and that we should be afraid of all Muslims doesn't really fit. It's a narrative that a lot of people believe in, but there are 1.8 billion Muslims in the world, and 63% of Americans say they've never even had a conversation with a Muslim.
When you put it that way, I'm not sure what you're saying. We've had a lot of these conversations. I think I've expressed myself and got a lot of criticism for my natural empathy for what the Muslim community is going through. But the notion that there's propaganda out there that perpetuates that all Muslims are terrorists, I don't. There are idiots in the world that think that, but I mean, I don't know that that's ever been an elevated mainstream concern that all Muslims are terrorists. I think a lot of what has been the argument is that, you know, travel ban. By the way, I almost support the president's effort to do what he's doing the way he's doing it. But the notion is that, you know, for all the folks who seem to be law-abiding, you know, well-minded, God-fearing people who come to this country, you know, a couple sneak through type of thing. That's the security issue that I think a lot of people have. Now, of course, you're living it on the ground, and prejudice exists, and there's a space between that, and I think what you asserted. React.
React.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do, and I've been fortunate enough that I haven't been directly impacted by a lot of prejudice, and I I have to claim, I mean, I think we're in a time where a lot of the veils have been lifted, and we're having a lot of conversation, a lot of dialogue about religion and about race and culture that we weren't having before. I think that's the positive thing about this time. And I am a native Rhode Islander, I'm a Caucasian person, I grew up in Warwick. There's some privilege that comes with that. So despite the fact that I walk around looking like this, I feel comfortable coming and sitting on a show with someone like you and having a conversation because I'm confident in myself. I think for immigrant women who perhaps English isn't their first language, I think that they're perhaps experiencing a lot more fear and bias and prejudice than perhaps I'm experiencing personally. And in this Open Mosque initiative, that is part of what we're trying to overcome, so that people can come in and have conversations and understand that they can be safe in a Muslim space amongst Muslims and really get to understand us.
Since you did a little bit of a background yourself, people will be curious. Were you born into an Islamic culture?
No, actually,
this is a choice you made? What happened?
This was a choice I made. I was raised in Warwick, Rhode Island, and I was raised in the Episcopal Church in a largely Catholic neighborhood. In my 20s, I really did some soul searching about my faith, and I had the opportunity in my early 30s to go to Cairo, Egypt, and teach at a university there. And it was through living in Cairo, living in a Muslim majority country, that I came to Islam and chose to convert. And I was Muslim for 8 years before I chose to take on the hijab, to wear the headscarf.
What was the trigger that caused your conversion?
Islam really spoke to my heart. I really liked the Muslim people. I really liked Islam from a practical point about how the day-to-day rituals of the faith revolve around the cycles of the sun, revolve around the cycles of the moon. There's a lot of just like peace and being good and practicality to it that really suited me, and I just felt called to it.
And then you stepped to another level, I guess, when you took on the hijab.
Precisely.
And what did that transition mean for you?
The transition for me was that we have a holy month of Ramadan, during which we fast for 30 days during the daytime hours, and I was really having a bit of an existential crisis. I had had my children by then, and I was trying to decide really how I wanted to raise them. And so I spent the month of Ramadan, which is a very sacred spiritual time for us, praying and really asking from God what he wanted from me, and this being visibly Muslim came out. So this was really stepping into what I feel God wanted for me. And then it's a very public display of something that's very private and personal. It's kind of an odd juxtaposition to have it.
Well, clearly you're very comfortable with answering the questions when we come back. What other kinds of questions might be answered not only here but at the Open Mosque exercise? Stay with us.
To take it through the system. It's very important. It's very important for the country, regardless of me or whoever succeeds at a later date. I mean, we have to have security in our country.
And that, of course, is the President's rationale for his double efforts at the travel ban. Look, we've had a lot of conversations about this. Now that that conversation has kind of quailed, it's not on the top of the news cycle very much anymore. What is the resonating anxiety level right now in the Rhode Island Muslim community?
I think the pulse is that we're feeling very cautious and uncertain. The travel ban impacts a large number of people in our community. The number of Muslims in Rhode Island, the count has been anywhere from like 12 to 16,000 Muslims. Many of them come from immigrant families. Many of them are second-generation immigrants, so it impacts the ability for families to travel back and forth to visit family, to have family come here and visit. So I think that it's still a concern. And it came to my awareness when a friend of mine had a family member die in Syria, and she wanted to settle up some affairs, and she tried to go to the Syrian embassy in New York, and it doesn't exist anymore. there are no more Syrian embassies or consulates in the United States of America. So for people who are of Syrian descent, that is a pretty serious issue when you're trying to manage things that impact your family overseas.
Yeah, the Syrian thing is it's unspeakable. I mean, some of the politics alone, the violence is just horrifying. The chemical attack, I think, brought to bear for 48 hours everybody's urgent worry about it, and it kind of comes off the screen, myself included. That's, you know, we've got Dr. Amalaji out of Brown that is stuck over there in Turkey. His wife is here in Rhode Island. They're going to end up maybe resolving going to Canada. Here's a guy who could be a major asset to Rhode Island, and when he's studying, it was for his new degree at Brown, and he gets caught up in that whole Syrian thing. The mess that it is very complicated. What's the overriding message that the Open Mosque Day, though? And again, we've got some information here and foxprovidence.com. Of course, you can follow up and learn. It's May 20th in 4 major mosques in the state. What happens? I mean, do people get a feeling that they can knock on the door and say hello to mosque anytime they want to? Is this like a one-time thing? You know, mosques probably are a little bit more mysterious to people than churches are, right? Right,
exactly. I mean, I think there's a sense that somehow we're more exotic and mysterious, and that's even pre-9/11. I think that there's this sort of idea that, you know, what happens in mosques is sort of, you know, surprising.
What do those people do in there?
Yeah, exactly. What's happening behind those doors? So that is part of what we want to do. We want to give people a tour so that they can see what the mosque is like. We want each person will have a tour guide to show them around. They'll get information about the ritual washing that we do before we pray. They'll get to hear about our prayers, maybe witness some prayers. They'll get to listen to some Quran. They'll get to learn about some of the cultural aspects for some of the people who have come from overseas. There'll be different foods available that they can try, and just really hopefully normalizing the experience, because the reality is mosques are open door and people can come anytime, but most people wouldn't feel comfortable just stepping into one without an escort of some sort to help educate them. So another place to get information is on ricma.org, and we do have speakers come out.
That's RICMA?
Yep, RICMA, the Rhode Island Council for Muslim Advancement. And so you can arrange for a speaker to come out to your organization. We also arrange mosque visits for groups. Tomorrow we have a lifelong learning collaborative, who's a group of retirees who study together, who are coming to visit the mosque up in Smithfield. And so we have this ongoing, but this Open Mosques Rhode Island is piggybacking on a national movement that's happening in major cities across the country, and we thought it would be really nice to do it here as well.
Makes sense. So all that information will be on our website at foxprovidence.com. Appreciate the visit.
Thank you for
having me.
having
Good luck with it on
me.
May 20th.
Thank you.
Alrighty. What's up next? We'll tell you next. So the line item veto is back in the legislature's travel of discussion, and one of the guys that's been pounding away on that is Ken Block, former two-time gubernatorial candidate. He returns to the program tomorrow right here on My State of Mind. Great to have you. Thanks very much for tuning in. 3 p.m. tomorrow. Talk to you on the radio on WPRO. Good night.